Can I ask a quick question first? I'm assuming
sure.
this time, given that we're trying to expand our time, that you won't give us sort of a cutoff. Is that right? I mean, I'm not going to go on and on and on, but I did.
Right at 25 minutes, I'll probably say something, Susan.
Okay.
But, it'll be gentle. And we won't shut you down at all.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Well, I have my cell phone shut off, so if you need to call me, Lori, I'll have to watch for it to vibrate.
Great. Okay.
Okay.
Either that or I'll just chat you or something at the bottom of the screen. Of course, I
Okay.
forget that sometimes.
And like I mentioned this morning, even with this small audience, this is going to be used after the fact.
Great.
Yeah.
Right. We're set.
Coffee?
2 minutes to just warm up my cold brew, and I never finished.
We had, it sounded like a jet flying real low a little while ago, and it was the shuttle Discovery. They're flying it out to Dulles to put
Oh,
it.
that's right.
And I couldn't figure it out. I thought it was something crashing, and finally I looked at the clock and remembered.
That's pretty neat. That's historic, isn't it?
They flew over, they flew over the city so that people on the mall could see it.
Oh,
Really pretty low.
that's neat.
And we missed it. We just heard it and thought, oh my gosh, what is that? We were inside.
I'm afraid any rumbling at this end will simply be massive construction on our building. Hopefully I'm far enough away from it, but
That's going to the Smithsonian, as I recall.
Well, yeah, but it turns out they've got a large hangar out at Dulles.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like a Smithsonian extension service out there.
Oh, okay.
No, I didn't know about it until this incident.
I think I saw that on the news last night or sometime. On your screen, do you see in practice mode?
Let's see.
I
On the upper
do.
right.
Scheduled to start in less than a minute is what I have. Do you want to start it now? We've got start or continue practice. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Okay. And when Lori gets back from heating her coffee, she can tell us if we've got people on starting to come in. That's why I like to go a minute late, just to make sure they get a chance to sign in. And you guys know, Sue, I'm going to open up with a lot of introductory American School Health Association stuff.
Sure.
Not coming on? I did have this in my own personal phone as 2:30, but hopefully you guys have been looking at 1 and 2 o'clock respectively.
Yeah, all good.
Yep.
Yeah, good.
Oh, they're rolling. Yeah, we are rolling.
Here they come. They're starting to come in.
Wait. 1 minute. We'll give it a
Yeah, we're going to wait. We're going to wait.
So Ashley's going to be monitoring questions and kind of compile the general questions towards the end of the session.
So I think 1 more minute.
Okay.
What you got for? Are they in?
12.
Okay, let's go ahead and begin.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Steve Conley. I'm the director of the American School Health Association, and it's my distinct pleasure to welcome you to another in a series of webinars hosted by ASHA, as we affectionately call the association. Today we're going to be discussing Proven Bullying Strategies, Part 2. This is the second of a series of two. The initial webinar was held a few months ago and is available to listen and to learn from on our webpage. ASHA is listed at ashaweb.org. And on behalf of the Board of Directors, the members, our volunteers, and leadership, I'm really pleased to have you join a very special faculty today. We have two presenters, and they have prepared, they're experts in the field of bullying prevention, and they've prepared addresses for you today, but you will have a chance to ask questions after the second presenter has finished. But first, let me let you know that the American School Health Association is a multidisciplinary professional membership group of about 1,000 individuals currently. We're open to any type of individual who serves and works in schools related to health education and related to school nursing, pediatrics, nutrition, social work, counseling, etc. So if you work in school health, you should join this family. We'd be glad to have you become a part of this community. The mission of the American School Health Association is to build the capacity of members to plan, develop, coordinate, implement, evaluate, and advocate for effective school health strategies that contribute to optimal health and academic outcomes for all children and youth. We have a spectacular journal that is highly acclaimed across the world called the Journal of School Health. In fact, we've learned that a number of people across Asia know Josh, the journal, who may never have heard of the American Health Association. Nevertheless, we hope you, if you're not already aware of the Josh, that you will investigate it, visit us online, the Journal of School Health. We have an annual conference. This year will be in San Antonio, Texas, October 10th through 13th. Again, visit us on the webpage. Consider joining us. Last year in Louisville, Kentucky, we had 500 professionals in the field, and this year we're expecting about 600 to attend the session in San Antonio. You can also join us, and we'd love it if you like us on Facebook. If you are one of the people that plays with Facebook, and of course it's a growing thing across the country and across the world, if you like us, you get immediate information, and that's the place to find out what other trainings we're offering, what special events may be available, and any new publications or initiatives that develop. Well, today I'm happy to say that our two presenters are Dr. Susan Windber and Dr. Richard Schaefer. Susan is down in South Carolina at Clemson, and Dick is out in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Both very great supporters who also presented for us in the original first of this series. Tell you about Sue first. Sue is a developmental psychologist. She holds a Master's of Legal Studies. Dr. Windber's research and writing has focused on legal and psychological issues related to bullying among children. She oversees dissemination of the Olweus program in the United States. Since 2001, she's provided consultations to the National Bullying Prevention Campaign, supported by the Health Resources and Services Administration of the United States Department of Health and Human Services. She's published numerous articles and books on the topic of bullying. So at this point, I would like to invite Dr. Sue Windber to step to the podium.
Great. Thank you very much. Well, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you all. I was invited to talk a little bit about our experiences in implementing and evaluating a particular Bullying Prevention Program, the Olweus Bullying Prevention Program. So what I'd like to do this afternoon is to, let me hang on one sec. Great. What I'd like to do this afternoon is give you a brief overview of the Olweus Bullying Prevention Program. Fairly brief. Some may be familiar with it, but others not, and I didn't want to assume familiarity. Then I want to move on and show some of the findings from the U.S. and abroad regarding the effectiveness of the program, talk about some current research that we've got underway with regard to the program and its use and effectiveness, and then say a few words about the importance of data collection at the local level. As important as it is to be good consumers of other people's research, it's always, of course, important to assess your own local needs and progress in meeting those needs. So that's my plan for about 25 minutes this afternoon. So let me start with then a quick overview of what the Olweus Bullying Prevention Program is, beginning with the goals. The goals are very straightforward, which are to reduce any existing bullying problems among students in elementary, middle, or high schools, prevent new bullying problems from emerging, and generally to achieve better peer relations at school. And these goals are met by a restructuring of the school environment, the climate of the school, so that opportunities and rewards for bullying behavior are reduced. The Olweus Bullying Prevention Program is a comprehensive school-wide program that includes components, or as you'll see here, puzzle pieces at 4 different levels. There are components that are implemented school-wide, and those that are implemented in classrooms. Other components of the program are implemented, as you'll see, at the individual level, working individually with children who've been involved in bullying and with their parents. And then finally, there are components of the program that involve the broader community beyond the school. And then you'll see parents in the middle of these 4 puzzle pieces. Parental involvement is important at all of these levels. So just to give a snapshot of some of the different activities that occur at these different levels. Let me start with the school level interventions. As a primary prevention program, there are quite a few program elements that are really designed to affect everybody or touch everybody in the school. So let me mention just a few points under each of these elements. One is the establishment of a coordinating group or a team that really serves as the school's engine behind the program. This is typically a representative team of maybe 9 to 12 members from all different constituencies in the school, whose job it is to really plan the implementation of the program and make sure that it's meeting the school's needs and that the program is well coordinated with other initiatives at the school. This committee receives extensive training and ongoing consultation, and this committee then in turn helps to train staff at the school, teachers as well as non-teaching staff such as custodial workers, bus drivers, and cafeterias, the whole school community with regard to what we know about bullying as well as implementation of this program in particular. Third school-wide element here I want to say a few words about. All students in grades 3 and higher complete on a yearly basis an anonymous questionnaire prior to the start of the program and then each year after that ideally. This questionnaire, which I'll come back to later, important in terms of evaluation, it measures students' involvement in bullying behaviors, their attitudes, their perceptions of adults' actions at their school. And it's also used by the coordinating team or committee not just to evaluate change over time, but really to help them plan to implement the program and to motivate staff to take on this issue. Recognizing the limits of a one-time training on bullying, you'll see here a 4th element of school-level interventions is to hold regular staff discussion groups. This is a time for ongoing learning and sharing about experiences in implementing the program, and it occurs in regular staff small group meetings. The 5th element you'll see here We encourage the adoption of 4 very straightforward rules about bullying that are introduced and discussed in the school, and they're reviewed regularly to make clear that what the school's expectations are for all student behavior. And you can see those rules here. And as you'll notice, they're not just thou shalt not sorts of rules, we won't bully others, but they're really focused on setting expectations about positive bystander behavior. A 6th element of school-wide interventions is to really review and refine the school's supervisory system to make bullying less likely to happen, particularly in those hot spots where kids tell school personnel on those questionnaires that it's most likely to occur. Schools typically launch the program with a sort of high-profile kickoff event with students and often parents at the start of a semester with a lot of energy in a way that really shows them that adults in the school take the issue seriously. And a final school-level intervention is last but not least, parental involvement. They're actively involved in the planning of the program, both in having parental representatives serve on the Bullying Prevention Committee, but being kept informed throughout about activities of the program. So that's a snapshot of school-wide activities that touch everyone. I want to mention a few critical elements of the program within the classroom. School-wide rules that I mentioned a moment ago do nothing if they're not discussed and posted and enforced consistently. So this is an important class-level component of the program. Classroom meetings are held weekly. This is a time to put the books away and for students and teachers to really build a sense of community, to talk about bullying and peer relations and engage in activities like role play to help increase students' perspective taking and skills in dealing with bullying. And this component of the program, as I'll mention a little bit later, appears to be particularly important in terms of the outcomes of the programs. And then finally, not only are regular meetings held with students, but ideally with parents, classroom level or perhaps grade level or team level meetings with parents are held periodically during the school year, again, to try to build a sense of community and discuss peer relations in general and bullying prevention in particular. Individual interventions are critical. One hopes, of course, that as school-wide and classroom-level interventions are implemented well, it will be less likely to have to intervene in bullying situations. But we all know that will need to take place and staff need to be ready to do that. So at the individual level, in addition to careful supervision of students' activities, we want to make sure that all staff have the skills and the training to be able to intervene effectively on the spot in the 30 seconds or a minute that they may have in a moment when, if they observe bullying or suspect that it's occurring, to do something to stop the bullying and to address it on the spot. So they receive extensive training in that. There's also training for specific individuals at the school, counselors and teachers and others who are identified by the school as needing to hold follow-up meetings with students who bully, students who are bullied separately, and their parents, and are given guidance in developing individualized intervention plans as needed. And then finally, just to say a few words about the 4th puzzle piece, which is community involvement. We recognize that bullying isn't just an issue for schools, but one that should involve the broader community around the school. So we encourage one or more community members to become active members of the school's coordinating or planning committee. We want to encourage the development of partnerships with community members that may be able to support the implementation of the program, but we also want to help spread the bullying prevention messages from the school outward into the community, into all those different activities that kids from the school engage in. So there are efforts to spread those bullying prevention messages beyond the schoolhouse doors. So with that overview of the Olweus program, I want to now turn to providing a little bit of information about what do we know about the effectiveness of the program. The program was developed in Norway by Dan Olweus, so I want to begin with some of his summary of some of his early research in Norway. How effective has the program been in Scandinavia? And then I'll turn to the United States. Olweus and his colleagues have conducted 6 or more evaluations now with more than 40,000 students since about 1983 when they began this work. And they have, across these various studies, found significant reductions by about, depending on the study and the age group, 20 to 70% in students' reports of being bullied and bullying others. They also reported reductions in kids' self-reports of a number of different antisocial behaviors, such as vandalism, fighting, theft, and truancy. So bullying as well as other related antisocial behaviors. Importantly, they also measured some significant improvements in the classroom social climate. So, for example, students' reports of improved order in the classroom or more positive social relationships and attitudes towards schoolwork and school in general for those schools implementing the program. They found some significant dosage effects. In other words, they found that those classes that more fully implemented the program saw greater reductions in bullying, and some elements of the program that seem particularly important include a couple I mentioned earlier, establishing clear rules against bullying and holding regular classroom meetings. And finally, of note, there were some interesting findings with regard to the timing of effects. They found that for older students, most of the results were seen for the younger students in grades 4 through 7, most of the results were seen within about a year, but the results seemed to take a little bit longer, in some cases 2 years, to appear for some of the older students in the Norwegian schools. As with any similar program, as I alluded to, there's variability, of course, in the degree to which schools implement the Olweus Bullying Prevention Program. Since research has shown, as I mentioned, that more complete implementation or higher fidelity is related to better outcomes, it's important to know then what factors are likely to be related to program implementation. What affects the ability of school personnel to more fully implement the program? So I want to just mention some interesting findings from Dan Olweus and his colleagues that were published a few years ago that looked at what variables at the teacher level and at the school level predict more implementation of the program. And these data are from about 89 Norwegian teachers who represented 37 different schools, grades 6 through 9. And just briefly to highlight some of these interesting findings, they looked at 3 different school level predictors, and they found 3 to be particularly important regarding implementation of the program. Teachers were more likely to implement the program when there was an openness in communication among teachers in the school, perhaps not surprisingly. Teachers were also more likely to implement the program in schools that had more bullying activities for staff. In other words, activities that likely generated more interest and motivation among the teachers. Finally, interestingly, teachers were less likely to implement the program in schools that they felt were characterized by good collaboration among the teachers. Now, this finding seems a little bit counterintuitive and maybe bears some additional scrutiny, but it's possible that high satisfaction among teachers with their working relationships with others doesn't necessarily promote a willingness for change in the school environment. Anyway, it's an interesting finding worth some follow-up. There were also some interesting teacher-level predictors of implementation. I won't spend a lot of time going into those, but just to mention and really to highlight that characteristics of individual teachers make a difference too. Were they themselves bullied as children? If so, more likely to implement bullying prevention programs. Do they perceive bullying in their school and in their classroom? If so, more likely to implement. So important to pay attention to those factors that affect implementation. Well, what do we know about evaluation of the Olweus program here in the United States? I want to give a sense of a variety of studies that have been conducted. The first wide-scale implementation and evaluation of the program here in the United States was conducted by myself and several colleagues in the mid-2000s, and it focused on students in grades 4 through 8 in 6 very rural school districts in South Carolina. And the results I'm going to mention represent findings after 1 year of implementation and taking a look at intervention schools versus some comparison schools. So after about 7 months of program implementation, we found some significant effects for several different indicators of bullying others. So for example, in the intervention schools, we saw a 16% decrease in the percent of students who indicated that they had bullied others on an anonymous questionnaire, and whether they had done that several times or more often. Whereas in the comparison schools where there was no program in place yet, we saw a 12% increase in the rates of bullying, so resulting in an overall relative reduction of about 28% in kids' reports of bullying others. We also saw an increase over time in the frequency of self-reported antisocial behaviors. Remembering Olweus found some effects on broader antisocial behaviors as well. So we saw significant differences between the intervention schools and the comparison schools in rates of delinquency, vandalism, school misbehavior, as well as sanctions, getting in trouble, being suspended, for example, for misbehavior at school. We didn't see in this study significant changes in the frequency with which students reported being bullied, interestingly, though that has been found in subsequent studies, which I'll mention. Another study in a very different setting, this time in urban Philadelphia schools, conducted by colleagues Black and Jackson. The program was evaluated in 6 public elementary schools and middle schools. 2/3 of the participants were from very low income homes, and participants in this study were mostly African American, about 82%, and Latino, about 10%. In this study, interestingly, the researchers used not only self-report questionnaire, but what I'll report on here is an observational measure to assess what they called bullying incident density. And what this was a check. They did a checklist of bullying behaviors that included physical bullying, verbal bullying, and emotional bullying. And they did observations of the elementary school students, which took place at recess, and observations of middle school students, which took place during lunchtime. And what they found was that bullying incident density decreased by about 45% over the course of 4 years, from about 65 incidences at baseline prior to the program to about 36 incidents per 100 student hours after the program was implemented. To give you a picture of another evaluation, this one in Washington State, the researchers compared the Olweus program effects in 7 schools that were implementing the program against 3 control schools that were not. And they found some significant program effects for relational victimization and for physical victimization, interestingly in this study among white students, not among other races. But for all races, they observed overall positive program effects with regard to students' perceptions that other students in the school were really actively intervening in bullying incidents. Our most recent project, which I wanted to introduce you to, is currently being written up for publication. by myself and some colleagues, involves a very large-scale project in Pennsylvania, and this was part of the Highmark Foundation's Healthy High Five initiative. It was generously funded by the Highmark Foundation, and our collaborators were researchers at Windber Research Institute and colleagues at the Center for Safe Schools in Pennsylvania. And this study involved 138 schools in Pennsylvania. As you can see, the division, 40 elementary schools, 50 sort of combo elementary middle schools, 26 middle schools, 14 junior senior highs, and 8 high schools. And we collected data at 3 time points at this point in our analyses, exactly 1 year apart. And what we used here was a selection cohorts design, which is one of the stronger quasi-experimental designs. We did not have control schools in this study. So I'd like to share just some of the key findings from our study so far, focusing on student responses to the Olweus Bullying Questionnaire, that anonymous questionnaire for students in grades 3 and higher. And again, as you'll see here, we have data at 3 time points prior to implementation in 2008, that's the blue bars, after at least 6 months of implementation in 2009, that's the red bars, and then after an additional school year in 2010, which is the green bars. And you'll see that we were able to look at trends for elementary grades, students in grades 3, 4, 5, in middle school grades, those in 6 through 8, and then in high school grades 9 through 12. Although, as you'll notice from a couple of slides earlier, the school buildings don't always lend themselves to these neat categorizations. So here you can see we looked at relative reductions or percent reductions in students' reports of, in this case, being bullied from 2008 prior to the program to 2010 after 2 years. And the relative reduction figures are represented by the RC percentages above each graph. So you can see we had a relative reduction among our elementary students in their reports of being bullied by about 10%, middle school students, age school students about 15%, and about 13% for the high school students. And interestingly, if we also took a look at students' responses, not just to the global question of how often have they been bullied, but to their specific responses to 9 different forms or ways that they could be bullied, as you can see listed along the right side of that slide. And what we found were even greater reductions, relative reductions in kids' reports of being bullied in 2008 versus 2010. To give you a sense for the magnitude of the reductions, we saw reductions by about 23% in verbal bullying, for example, 18% for social exclusion, 26% for physical bullying. And you can see similar rates for other types of bullying as well. Here's the same trends that we see for middle school students. Good reductions by about 22% for verbal bullying, 25% social exclusion, and then about 20% for physical bullying and rumor spreading. And similarly, some good trends for high school students. Reductions, for example, in verbal bullying about 21% and on down from there. Looking at kids' responses to a general question of how often have they bullied others, you can see that we found more dramatic decreases in these reports. Relative reductions among elementary students of about 27%, middle school age students 35%, and high school students by about 40%. And I won't go through all the percentages, but you can see then when you break it down again into the different types of bullying that they may have engaged in, decreases, fairly large decreases by about 48% for verbal bullying here among elementary school students. Here are the trends for middle school students and for high school students as well. So here we can see about a 43% decrease in verbal bullying, 30% for social exclusion, and 30% for physical bullying. We also took a look at some other interesting questions from the Olweus Bullying Questionnaire. Here you can see we found marked decreases in the percentage of students who think that their teacher has done little to stop bullying. In other words, more and more feeling their teacher has done something to address bullying in those after program implementation. And here we looked at the percentage of students who feel that other students often try to stop bullying. An important part of the program is really engaging kids to be active helpers, active bystanders. And here in particular we see that among the slightly older students some sizable increases in the percentages who felt that other students often try to stop bullying. Increases of about 21% in middle, 32% in high school students. And we were interested in their reports of what they do if they see a student bullied. And across the age groups, you can see we found sizable decreases in the percentages who said they would be passive bystanders or just sort of sit by and watch if another student was bullied. And we found decreases in the percentage who felt they could join in bullying, which is also good news, both among elementary, middle, and high school students. Our analyses are continuing. As I mentioned, these analyses are currently being done and completed and written up. I wanted to mention that we're currently analyzing a 4th year of data, in other words 3 years post-program implementation, as well as experiences of a number of different other different cohorts of students, and we're using hierarchical modeling in these analyses. We're also taking a look at data that we've collected from the schools that assess the fidelity with which they implemented the program. I mentioned some of Olweus' research on this issue earlier. And so we're going to be analyzing what, if any, relationship there is in our Pennsylvania data between implementing the program with fidelity and positive program outcomes. As folks on the line may be familiar, there have been a number of different meta evaluations in recent years trying to take a look at how effective are bullying prevention programs in addressing bullying, and they have certainly somewhat different conclusions. A recent meta-analysis by Toffe and Farrington, which I think was probably the most comprehensive of the meta-analyses, concluded that there is some good news in the field, that school-based bullying prevention programs really can be effective. They vary in their effectiveness, but they can be effective, resulting overall in about a 20 to 23% reduction in bullying. And they also noted that those inspired by the work of Dan Olweus that embraced a comprehensive approach to bullying were the most effective. Now finally, before turning this over to Dick to learn about their good work, I wanted to say just a few words about the importance of collecting and analyzing local data to assess your own bullying prevention efforts. And I have just a few recommendations for local communities in this regard. It is, of course, important to be good consumers of data that others have collected about the nature and the prevalence of bullying and the effectiveness of specific bullying prevention approaches. But as important as this is, I would really encourage you not to rely exclusively on others' findings and experiences. Every community is different, and it's really critical to collect data in your own communities to assess your needs and to find out what solutions work for you. And key questions in this regard include, well, what issues are of concern to stakeholders in our own communities? What are our strengths and our needs, and to what extent does this program or bullying prevention initiative meet the needs of our community? Does it work for us? Can we sustain it over time? And these are questions that really can only be answered through local data collection. A second point to make is that outcomes clearly are important to measure. In order to know if you're successful in addressing bullying or any public health issue for that matter, you need to have clear research questions, set realistic benchmarks, and test them in your own community. Having positive outcomes from your own community to share with members of your community, I think, is really critical if you hope to sustain your efforts over time. In the Olweus program, as I've mentioned, schools administer anonymous surveys to students every year, hopefully, and what they get is very personalized school level or sometimes district level reports that help them show their progress over time in addressing bullying behaviors and attitudes. And those data have been really helpful in the local community as well as to the school themselves, of course. Third, I would emphasize that outcomes are not the only important things to measure, however. Understanding the process is really important as well. Knowing that bullying has decreased among children and youth in your community is absolutely good news, but that information is of limited value if you don't know how it happened and whether you can replicate it in your community or sustain it over time. So it's really important to collect information about such things as, well, what were the activities that were engaged in our community? Who was involved? What was the dosage of the various activities? And are we implementing this project as it was planned? In other words, it's important to document what you're doing along the way, not just how effective it is. And that way you can really help to determine how it may be related to your outcomes. And finally, just to mention that data can and should be used throughout your projects. Local data really can be used very effectively to help answer questions along the way, such as, is this intervention really addressing our goals as we've gotten into it? How can we use our findings after maybe 1 year to modify our approach if it's needed? And do we need to make changes along the way to training or consultation or tweaks to other aspects of the program to make sure it's effective in our own community? Be happy to take questions later on, but just to leave you with this contact information. If you'd like more information, don't hesitate to contact me or to take a peek on the olweus.org website.
Sue, thank you again. That was your usual clarity, and I appreciate the language. Very easy to understand, even for a layman like myself. Great to have you on this webinar.
Thanks.
Thank you, and we'll be coming back to you. I should tell folks, if you have questions related to Sue's presentation, go ahead. You can begin typing those in. We'll be gathering them, and then after Dr. Schaefer, we'll turn to open up a question and answer discussion period for both of our presenters. Likewise, we'll be giving you information on how to obtain CHESS credits for this webinar and a few more small announcements. But at this point, I'm very pleased to introduce my friend, Dr. Dick Schaefer. Dick is the Development, Research, and Evaluation Manager at Children's Hospital, Wisconsin. He's based in Milwaukee, as I noted before. Dr. Schaefer has more than 20 years of experience designing, developing, conducting, and analyzing programs. His experience ranges from public school research to teaching and training and developing online programs for GE Medical, Marquette University, the Wisconsin Technical College System, and the Medical College of Wisconsin. Dr. Schaefer has served as a middle and high school teacher, high school assistant principal, and he was a principal in a major metropolitan school district. So without further ado, I pass the gavel off to Dick Schaefer.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Stephen, and thank you, Susan. I really enjoy all your presentations because I learn so much each time I hear you present, and it just it validates a lot of the things that we're doing at Children's Hospital of Wisconsin. I suppose that there will be some of you that will be wondering, well, what does Children's Hospital of Wisconsin have invested in the bullying prevention program? And that's a very good observation. Just very briefly, about 3 years ago, we were blessed with getting a new CEO and president of our hospital system. And her goal was to help Wisconsin have the healthiest pediatric population in the nation. And as we had already begun our e-learning programs in 2 other areas, one in wellness and obesity prevention and one with alcohol, tobacco, and other drug prevention, she wholeheartedly supported and embraced the Blue Kids program, which is the program under which our hospital program is initiated. She also charged us with then looking at something that might be more significant on a national basis. And we have taken that responsibility as part of our bullying initiative. Today is our discussion. I want to share very briefly a little quick review of what we did in webinar 1, just so those of you that might be new can sort of fill in here as you were able to do with Susan's presentation. We're going to look a little critically at some evaluative criteria, some assessment protocol that we think is significantly important. We have been in the business now. This is the end of our second year of research in the bullying prevention initiative, and then, as Sue pointed out, we'll be taking questions. I don't think there's anyone in our audience or probably across the nation today that knows that bullying is not a huge problem. And we have been very, very fortunate in Wisconsin to have the great leadership of our State Superintendent, Tony Evers, who has participated in several of our bullying prevention events, including delivering the keynote in a kickoff initiative 2 years ago, and also delivering the keynote on our online parent and staff training initiative. Headlines are all around us. We can't ignore the fact that all of us, we have to be doing something about bullying in our schools. And I feel all too often schools are believing that they can only be engaged in bullying when it actually occurs on the school grounds. And that's one of the things that we try to, as we look at our national based pilots, to share that this, in all the states that have bullying prevention programs, to our knowledge, as long as bullying is going on and it disrupts the normal school program, schools have not only the right but the obligation to take action and implement their strategies for future prevention. At our first webinar, we talked a little bit about the fact that there were some overlying characteristics that were evident in all effective bullying programs. And I think Catherine Bradshaw, John Hopkins kind of summarized them best. And Susan also incorporated 7 of these 10 in her presentation. So I won't belabor them again, but I think the kind of things that significantly jump out in both Susan's presentation and my presentation is that we're really focusing on the school social environment. We're looking at the school climate. And the other thing that Susan pointed out that I think is so very important is you are collecting local data. You can use the Olweus Bullying Questionnaire, or you could use the data collection instrument for school climate provided by the Center for Disease Control. That can be accessed through your local Department of Education or Public Instruction. It's critical that all staff and parents are engaged in the process and in training. Intervene consistently, and as Susan points out, this is not a one-year or one-step event. This must be sustained over time. 3 years is a minimum in terms of rigorous effective, but over a longer period of time as appropriate. When we began to build Act Now, which is our online bullying blended program for bullying prevention, we looked at how are we going to make sure that this is the level of quality that we think it is deserving, but also that is an effective and easy implementation for staff. And so we looked at about 100 research studies, and we mapped out the characteristics that most effective programs had. And we began to build our e-learning component around those effective characteristics. We also knew that if we were developing an e-learning initiative, that would be used by a broad range of schools from Milwaukee, Wisconsin to Rhinelander, Wisconsin, which is in the northern part, to Richland Center on the west, and to Neenah on the east. We couldn't build something that one size would fit all. So we engaged in a blended approach so that half of the lessons are e-learning lessons, and those e-learning lessons are highly engaging, interactive, role-playing, etc., which I'll share in a little bit. But the other lessons that are followed for each e-learning lesson are a classroom discussion, which will have many of the same characteristics that Susan pointed out: role-playing, putting classroom rules together, etc. This allowed us to implement the content with fidelity across all schools, but also allowed school staff to customize the particular program to the standards and values in the school and community that they represented. So we think that we were able to put together a package that we, at least as we jumped off in year one, experienced some relatively positive success. In year one, in 2011-12 school year, we had over 15,000 students in Wisconsin that were online and in classroom discussions for the program. We were able to expand this to 3 other states by a national grant that we received, and so we have pilot projects going on in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Broward County, Florida. We have received 2 significant recognized awards from the Department of Public Instruction of Wisconsin. We just received a $37,000 grant, which is a matching grant to develop kindergarten through 3rd grade program.
Just my luck.
We are pleased because of the progress and success that we have been able to leverage a very strong partnership with the Milwaukee Public Schools Violence Prevention Office, and are presently involved in 10 Milwaukee Public Schools right now in a comprehensive research initiative. And we've been invited to highlight a program at several national conferences and presentations. We're really looking at the bystander as the primary focus of our initiative. And so when we looked at our overall project goals, we wanted to look at the effectiveness of the bullying prevention program at the middle school level, because that's where we began. And we started at the middle school level because when we went to 2 meetings of the Wisconsin Professional School Counselors Association and asked them, where should we start? They all believed that beginning at the elementary school level would be a very smart and appropriate strategy, but the pain was at the middle school level. And so they suggested that we start at the middle school level and look at designing down from middle school to now we have a 4th and 5th grade program, and we'll be developing the K-3 program for launch in January of 2013. We looked at a wide range of programs. We involved a large percentage of teachers and administrators, consultants from the Department of Public Instruction, Medical College of Wisconsin experts, to design our program and make sure that it fit the research, but also fit the humanistic needs that the children we were going to be working with. When we launched our initiative around our research study, we wanted to look at 3 major hypotheses. And they basically said in a nutshell was that students that were involved in the e-learning program where teachers and staff were engaged in staff training would show a greater decrease in bullying than students that were involved in bullying incidents where no staff training occurred, and this in turn both would have a greater reduction in bullying than students that were in control group schools. So those were our 3 hypotheses as we started our research study. We started out with 3 schools that had students and staff component of about 2,000 students. We had 3 middle schools where there was only a student component, and then we had 1 middle school where there were no staff or student components. That was our most difficult challenge. First of all, we couldn't find a middle school that wanted to be a control group because all schools wanted to be participants in one or the other programs. I was a little bit slow in figuring out why don't we launch the control group school right up at the beginning of the school year and then follow that at the end of the school year with implementing whatever they wanted. But that wasn't the case. And you'll see in our results, the other mistake that I made was that I did not carefully prescribe the things that the control middle school should not do. So they did not do student and staff training, but unbeknownst to us, they held seminars, they held student and staff meetings, they held guest speakers that came in, et cetera, et cetera. So the results that we're going to see will show that the staff and student training component drove bullying down significantly over either of the other 2 programs. We specifically chose the Olweus Bullying Questionnaire because it, and Susan pointed this out very nicely, it is the gold standard. And we felt if we could use the Olweus Bullying Questionnaire to demonstrate positive improvements in bullying prevention in our schools using our program, this would be viewed as part of the gold standard. And so I had the good fortune of meeting not only Susan last year at the International Bullying Convention, but Dan Olweus. I shared our results with him and complimented him on the design, and I think in one of Susan's slides you saw her tell the idea that schools that have paid attention to the concepts and the constructs of the Olweus training program do much better regardless of what program they adopt, and that's exactly true with ours also. Our data was analyzed by Hazelton Publishing Company out of Minneapolis, Minnesota, and you'll see that we'll have some of the same categories of data that Susan had. And we're presently we're 1 day away. I was hoping that it was going to arrive. We're 1 day away from doing the final statistical analysis by the Medical College of Wisconsin. But in our verbal conversation, what they're telling me is that the findings that we have through the Hazelton analysis will show that this data is statistically significant at least the 0.01 probability level. So here's our Act Now demographics. We had 29 teachers involved. We had grade levels of 6th through 8th grade. The schools were geographically dispersed. We had rural, suburban, and one urban, large urban school district. We had over 4,000 students engaged. And as we move forward in this year, we now were able to keep the same schools that started in 2011 and 12, but and these are engaged in a more longitudinal study. We've been able to add 10 Milwaukee public schools, which will give us an additional 6,000 students in a very significant urban population. Just quickly on the bottom here, our initiative is a game-based engaging e-learning component. There are 5 sessions plus 5 discussions at 6th grade. There are 3 sessions plus discussion at the 7th grade. There actually are 3 sessions in discussion at the 3rd grade, or at the 8th grade. But the significant part about, and the reason that started out with 2 sessions is the 3rd session that we added was on transition to high school. And we added that session as we did focus groups with 8th grade students, and we said, okay, you're going from the top of the level in a middle school to the bottom of the level at the high school. What are you afraid of? And I remember one strapping big football player kid said, I'm terrified because I know we're going to get bullied, we're going to be made fun of, etc. So we went to the high schools, did a whole series of interviews, videotapes, branching discussions to create, we're getting really, really high grades on that transition to high school. This will kind of give you a snapshot of what the e-learning components are. On the left side is the staff component, and that is a 30-minute kickoff with the staff. And then there are 4 one-hour training sessions that are led by the school champion and that school committee that Susan talked about. And we have a whole series of things, including the parent perspective. One of the things we've gotten high marks on this is that it shows 3 bullying situations that are staged, and the actors are regular middle school students, both the bully and the bullier, the bully and the victim and bystanders. And it gives the teachers an opportunity to see what an expert would have done in the moment when that occurs. So I'm going to just move over there. Thank you. Did I lose my screen here?
Move.
There we go.
There you go.
Here we have a number of different kinds of organizing examples here in the program. We have a journaling component. We have a threaded discussion forum, looks at social learning. Our results are in the form of 3 different components. We asked the students what they think of the program. We asked the teachers, and then we looked at the data. The students talked about they like the real people and the real situations. They like the threaded discussion because they could be honest about what they were talking about. And they like the virtual stuff. Kids that normally wouldn't speak out in class were able to participate in the threaded discussion. Has to be monitored, obviously, by the teacher. This is what the teachers are saying. They like to know the difference between snitching and difference between snitching and telling. So what we really were looking at, as Susan pointed out, was the school climate. And so we use a variety of methods for school climate improvement. And we looked at the outcomes and the results of the program based on the Olweus survey. And we really are comparing now the students' course with staff training and the student course with no staff training. So we're just taking a peek on how that looked. Same basic components that Susan talked about. With staff training, there was a 27% reduction in bullying as compared to 9% reduction in schools with no staff training. And had you bullied another student, there was a 13% reduction in schools with staff training and only a 7% reduction in schools without staff training. We ask about the victim. Were you afraid of being bullied? There was a 19% reduction in number of students afraid of being bullied compared to 10% of students with no staff training. Some other results that we found that were interesting. The bullying circle after taking the course seemed to be reduced by 20%. Percentage of students who were reprimanded or talked to by teachers went down because bullying had decreased. And percentage of students who told teachers or other adults increased by 24%. We thought this was particularly interesting. In Oregon Middle School in Wisconsin asked that we feel comfortable sharing this because they did a pre- and post-test school climate survey before and after the course in addition to Olweus that they got through the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction. And this compared 2009 before to 2010 after. 59% of the students felt safe in school before the class and staff training, and 91% felt safe afterwards. Show respect for other students. Only 21% felt that students showed respect before, and increased to 50%. I am treated by respect by other students. 43% were felt they were treated respectfully, up to 80%. The appreciation for this being a good school, again, almost doubled. When we looked at the results of their teacher and parent survey, my school environment promotes student achievement that is bully-free, an increase of 45 to 55%, relative change of about 20%. Show respect for each other, parents said 38 to 71%. And in the staff training, it went up 20%, but relative change of a third. We think this is really significant. We're very excited. We're just collecting the longitudinal data from all these schools as we speak. So I'll just pause here and take questions. I did get a slide out of order, I guess. I was going to give you contact information. I jumped out of the space.
We'll let you get to it, Dick. Thank you again.
All right, here we go.
Okay. Dick, we'll post that in just a minute while we're in the discussion phase. We'll get your contact information on board. Let me tell folks who've been attending how you'll get credits, chess credits for this webinar. After the presentation, we'll be sending out an email. You'll receive a link to SurveyMonkey. Once you've completed the evaluation survey, you'll receive the next step, and then you'll receive credits for attending and becoming part of this webinar. I want to thank those of you who've written in. We don't know why we've had background noise, but we appreciate your help. We've been trying to find it, and it sounds like we finally did capture it. And some folks have asked as well, will the slides from the two presentations be posted? Yes, as with all of our webinars, the PowerPoint slides will be available on the American School Health Association webpage. And again, that's ashaweb.org or ashaweb.org. I would also, before I turn to a few of the questions we've received, wanted to make sure you're aware that April 30th we're doing a webinar related. It's a chat, sort of a coaching exercise for health coordinators and health educators, and all are welcome to join us on that. Likewise, on May the 3rd, we obviously have a very popular topic. Our Research Council is sponsoring utilization of secondary data sets, such as the Youth Risk Behavior Survey and the AdHealth, the National Longitudinal Survey of Adolescent Health. And we're also working on one that the Mental Health Council is developing on the stigma of seeking mental health services. We know we have guests from across Alaska to New Mexico, as well as a number of folks on the East Coast. I want to thank you for joining us, and I'll turn now, Sue and Dick, to a couple of questions that we've received, and we've opened up the microphone so each of you can respond. The first thing is dealing with cost. A number of people are asking the extensive nature of both of your programs kind of worry some of these folks about implementation because of what the cost may be. Can you give us some idea of what the cost nature is? And Sue, I guess we'll start with you.
Sure. I mean, it's a critical question in these times where funds have dwindled, and certainly everybody's got to be good consumers and stewards of their money. So I appreciate the question. It's a bit of a difficult question to answer because the cost of the Olweus program really depends to a large extent on the size of the school and the number of staff. So I'd refer you for specifics to olweus.org, where you can look for some very specific tools to help you calculate the cost of the program. But let me say a couple of things. There are different kinds of costs. There are program material costs, and then there are also some training costs. For school districts, particularly if you're a school district with more than 10 school buildings, that you can be purchasing online versions of the materials, which cut your costs significantly. So we're really finding schools, many are surprised at the affordability of the program, and so for example, for about $1,000 for school over the course of 3 years are able to get all the materials that they need. But again, for specifics, it'll depend on the size of the school and the level. So feel free to email me afterwards or go to the website to be able to plug in some specific numbers. And then I'll turn to Dick for his feedback on that question.
Very good. Thank you, Sue. Our entire program can be purchased online, and it includes the student component, the e-learning staff component, the staff training guide, as well as the teacher guide that goes along with the program. Generally speaking, we sell the school district a site license, and depending upon the size of the district, the site license can range from any place from $2 to $3 a student down to maybe $1.50 a student. The smaller the district, the less the cost, and so we basically look at that. In addition, if there is an interest in having on-site staff training or staff development, we do that in the initial 1 day, and the 1 day consists of detailed training for the school champion and the teachers that are going to implement the student component. That is for a half day, and then we would be able to do the other half day for all staff, which would constitute the first 2 or 3 one-hour training sessions that are available. But we have schools that are using this with no preliminary on-site training that we have offered. We also offer a webinar that provides an opportunity for webinar training, so the cost of travel and consulting is not incurred. So it could range from any place from $1.50 a student to $3 a student, depending on the size of the district.
Okay, thank you both. Now here's another question, and you may have just touched on part of this, Dick, but if both of you could hit the first part, it would be great. They're asking, can you share some specific staff training topics and where to find content for staff meetings?
Sure. Dick, do you want to start?
Sure. Our staff training component is the 30 minutes that is an e-learning component that's online. Incidentally, in Wisconsin, the State Department of Public Instruction has just contracted with us to provide this free from the State Department's website to all Wisconsin school districts that are willing to implement it district-wide over a 3-year period. So that was just a huge endorsement by the Department of Public Instruction. So that is the kickoff, and that's generally 30 to 40 minutes, and it's a discussion starter. Session number 1 is looking at your local school data and interpreting the data to see what kinds of initiatives are really important to begin right off from the get-go. Number 2 is setting up committees to deal with what the data has told us and what the committee actions are going to be. We know that through the successful programs, there's always some form of a school-wide campaign, a school-wide initiative that transcends time, that goes on over a series of years. And so session 3 of the training is designing a school-wide program that will intersect the student school-wide program that they're developing from their course and instruction at about the same endpoint. So the staff and the students come together for that school-wide initiative. It might be a school-wide campaign, or it just has varied from school district to school district. And then the fourth component, the fourth 1-hour session, is involving your school community. And I can't say enough about the school community involvement, and one of the things that we have emphasized regularly is to be sure to use your local media as a resource and not a risk, because the local media can just do wonders in terms of sharing with the community what the problem is, but more importantly, sharing with the community what the school districts are doing. And that gets a huge amount of positive public relations for the school buildings that are engaged. And then schools then also do the, not all, but they have the option of doing the pre and post Olweus questionnaire. And the pre and post Olweus questionnaire is easily administered. It's about 30 minutes on each end. Our processing fee at Hazleton is $1 per username and password. We don't mark that up, and for that, Hazleton generates school reports so the school district can use those reports as part of their sharing with the staff and the community. One of the things that has really, I've seen, really make this a school staff that does not believe there's that big of a problem step forward and step up is when they look at the data and they find out that the second largest place bullying takes place is in the classroom when the teacher is present. And they think, oh my goodness, we think we better do something now. So that kind of rounds up our training plan.
Sue, anything else to add?
Sure. With the Olweus program, there's different levels of training. I mentioned this coordinating committee or team, and they get 2 days of intensive training by a certified trainer. They learn lots of background information about what do we know about bullying as a phenomenon, what are some of the myths that some of us hold. They are then walked through very interactive training on the various elements of the program. There's 4 different puzzle pieces that I mentioned. And a critical part of the training then is sitting down with their school level data, as Dick described from the Olweus Bullying Questionnaire, with their trainer consultant, analyzing what's going on at their school. And Dick's right, I have yet to see school personnel who aren't really surprised and motivated by something that the kids have to say, whether it's the primary location of bullying, how much is going on, the types of bullying. So they really spend some time with their trainer consultant, digging through their school level data and then planning the specific implementation of their program over time. The trainer consultation relationship doesn't stop there. We assign a trainer consultant to a school, and they stay in regular touch with the school through at least the first year. We found that is so important, not just to train and wish them well, but really to help hold hands, to problem solve, to give ideas when schools may be struggling with particular implementation issues. So that's our training and consultation model.
One other question is talking about the difficulty. How hard is it to collect the data necessary to get a good baseline in terms of beginning an intervention within a school system or a district? Can either of you speak to data collection? It's kind of a scary subject.
I can give a little shot at that. The schools that we have engaged in data collection using the Olweus survey, I use a metaphor, it has been a slam dunk. The generation of the usernames and passwords, it's not matched pairs, so you don't have to worry about the pre and post test having one-to-one relationships. We're running about 97% of the student body that did the pre-test also does the post-test. It's 30 minutes on both ends. It does require a computer lab or a cart, so that is the planning component that must go into it. But other than that, it's very, very straightforward. It's analyzed by Hazelton when the report is ready, which is usually in about a week or 10 days at max. The organizer gets an email saying your report is ready. You go to the website with the username and password they gave you, you download it, you print it, and it's a done deal.
Just to add to that, in addition to, at least if folks are using the Olweus Bullying Questionnaire, in addition to the online version that Dick's talking about, you can opt to do a good old-fashioned pencil and paper version where you have students fill in bubble sheets if schools don't have easy access to computer labs to have all the students complete that in a timely way. It's certainly an area that I think some schools worry about, but like Dick's experience, we've found that schools have had a really relatively easy time doing this. The questionnaire is anonymous. Most schools really view this as part of their planning, and so are able to send out a letter to parents but use passive consent, invite parents who are concerned to have their children not participate, but typically schools don't require active parental consent, so that they're really able to get pretty much every student participating. Very few, if any, concerns are raised about the content of the questions, and as Dick said, get their analyses, their reports back in a really quick way so that they can really see what issues they need to address.
Just one additional addendum here. Schools that would like to do the Center for Disease Control survey, which is no charge at all, similar questions but not the same, and the data is published back a little differently, can go through their own Department of Education or Department of Public Instruction. And once they have their school identification number and link, they simply go right into the CDC website. It analyzes it automatically, gives you the data back. That was the first pre and post survey that the Oregon School District used prior to the Olweus that I shared that data with you about students feeling safe at school and showing respect for others and so forth.
Well, once again, I want to thank you both for an excellent hour and so many minutes. I always learn from both of you, and we're very honored to have you join us in this second in the series. All of you who have attended today, thank you very much. Again, friend us or like us on Facebook, follow us closely, check out additional trainings that are up and coming. We've posted the conference for October, and we would love to see you down in Texas with us. And again, Dick Schaefer, Sue Limber, thank you for the time and the work that we know you put together, and really for all that you're doing for kids across the nation. Thank you.
Thanks
both.
so much. Pleasure.
Thank you all, and you're very welcome.
Appreciate it.